Hello, Dead Art Studios here, digital, and we're back for my second video on my channel. And in this video we're going to look how we made this piece that's just disappearing now as we head into Adobe Fresco. Now this is running on 5 times speed, so it took me about 1 hour 40 minutes to make. And I started off with an A4 canvas, and what I'm doing is I'm making a 3D box shape for the face that I want to draw. And often, you know, this is just me playing and doing my art, and this channel's just a little bit about how I get my inspiration and the processes that I use. So because I want to start off with a 3D sort of face and head shape, I draw the box and then I start to rough out what I want it to look like, the angles and things like that. And this is as much about practice as anything else, and trying to improve my drawing skills. So it doesn't look very pretty at the minute, but I'm just playing around and warming up, and the piece, as you see at the beginning, looks nothing really like this. But this is a starting point and a way of getting going, and often one of the difficult things you might find if you want to do art, digital art or any kind of art, is just getting going. So once I put the black outlines on, I decided to try and refine it a bit more. So I started a new layer above in Adobe Fresco and started drawing on with the red. Now I do enjoy using Adobe Fresco. It's designed to be used by touch, whereas Photoshop's more for using mouse and touch as well. But I can turn my little computer into tablet mode and just sit there and draw away, you know, like you're on an iPad or any kind of tablet. And it's great for that, and it's really quite intuitive and a great program, and it's free. So if your computer will run it or your tablet will run it, then I really do recommend getting hold of it and having a good old play with it. So I've got another layer on top of that, and I'm trying to refine it further and come up with more of the shape that I want from the figure, and delete the layers below, and I resize it and get it so it fills the frame quite nicely. So having a little think here about what to do next, and you know, maybe I'm going off for a break, getting a cup of cocoa, something like that. I've got a cup of cocoa right here, so I'll just have a sip. Yeah, I must have disappeared off somewhere for a break. I did this last night and I did want to do the audio straight after, but then I was just super tired, so I left it. So just trying to make the head look a bit more the correct shape by using the eraser and playing with all the different brushes that you get in Fresco as well. And there's quite a lot to choose from. These brushes that I'm about to use now, the wet media brushes, and they're like watercolors and oils, and they move and interact with the different bits of paint, if you want to call it, as you put those on and blend and blur in together. So I do enjoy using those, and I'm just trying to get some skin tones in on the face and a bit of darkness around the eyes and the nose and the mouth and just below where the hair would be. So I'm trying to do some shadows. So even though this piece, which I'm sort of calling, I guess, a crafter, I think it looks like a crafter, someone into crafts. Yeah, so this crafter is not super realistic looking at the end. It's not realism, but I'm still experimenting with shadows and light and things like that. And you know, it's all about practice and developing my skills. So we're going to put some different colours in, creating some different shadows around the eye and the nose there, and onto the cheek, and then the highlights are on sort of forehead and sort of what would be the right cheek from their perspective, and the chin. And I'm trying to think about a sort of light source, but also I'm just kind of having fun with it and not worrying too much about that. So I paint some eyes in with the bluey purple and then blur it out with a smudge tool, which, if your device will handle it, is a very nice tool, but it is quite high on processing power and RAM and your graphics card and things like that. So you know, it might struggle. My new device that I've got really does eat this kind of thing up for breakfast, which is really quite nice because I've never had that luxury before, and it's really opened up quite a lot of new options for me, like this watercolor brush, which I'm using to create the hair up here, and I'm trying to use a couple of different tones. I've gone for a sort of purple rinse on this crafter person. Now, I don't know really if it's a man or a woman, but I'm not too worried about that. I think it's an androgynous crafter. It could be either, you know, whatever it sort of fills your idea of who this person might be, who you might have seen out in the world, or who you might be yourself if you are a crafter. I'm a bit of a crafter as well as a painter, and I do knitting and stuff. At the moment though, I haven't had a lot of time to do that kind of thing, and being a bit of a person that jumps from one thing to another, that's took the back burner. I will return to it one day though. So there I'm getting a body on this nice bright red, which I did quite like, and now I'm getting sort of Napoleon Dynamite vibes, and I'm putting a hot sort of a mustardy yellow into the background as well, just using different layers to achieve that, and then trying to block in some of the eyes a little bit more here with this sort of purpley magenta tone, and then using an eraser to sort of cut and create some angles, and then going darker and darker as you head further into the eye sockets. Now I think at this point I've realised that it's not going to be a piece of realism, and we're sort of just doing something that's expressionistic for me and for me to enjoy. So we've got a bit of blue on the nose as well as that comes down on the front where the highlight will be, and then I'm just trying to figure out how to clean that up. It's on a lower layer, and then I sort of faff around a bit and finally figure it out at some point. And those kind of things can happen, you know, you find these weird little artifacts when you're doing multiple layer work, and then you're like, oh, where's it all come from? I flattened it all down so that I can blend it all together and use the liquefy tool to push and move and shape and warp the piece, which is one of the main things I do with my digital art. I love to use a liquefy tool to create effects and also to change the shapes of the components of a face or a body or a figure. Choosing some brushes there, having a little scribble, thinking about what I want to do around the neck to sort of blend it together. And at this point I go for a little collar in red in this brush that I got from the winter pack, I think, from Adobe. You can go and download extra brushes, and it gives you loads of cool choices to choose from. And then I use the eraser just to sort of tidy it up, make it look like a little collar around the jumper. And I think, why not throw that red in for the mouth as well, and then start to slice away at that with the eraser as well. So changing my shape dynamics and angles on my smudge brush, I always get fed up with how it smudges and then start changing it around, and I can't decide whether it's worse or better, and in a couple of days I'll do the same. Then I started playing there with some of the more exciting brushes, but decided that that wasn't for this piece. Then I was looking at how to blend this mouth better into the surrounding. I did sort of want a watercolour kind of look, like the watercolours have been put on very thinly and soaked into the paper in places, and then have that solid yellow colour on the outside. Then some black slit like eyes, almost like like the eyes of a chameleon or something. Which way does a chameleon eye go? Do they go horizontal or vertical? Let me know if you're into reptiles and you know that kind of thing. And then I went for this sort of light blue to find the pupils of the eye and create a bit of contrast there, and we're starting to get somewhere. But at this point I was getting frustrated with the piece in general and didn't really feel like it was like doing a lot. I thought I'd throw some glasses in, see if that made it look a bit better. Used a bit of a sort of random brush for that from the brush set. I can't remember which one it was, and then sort of wasn't very pleased at this point. I thought, well, this is not really what I didn't want to call this a finished piece. So I thought, right, we're gonna have to head out into madness now. So at this point I'm trying out different weird things to do with the liquefy tool, and just moving around and creating the eyes a bit bigger, just changing things around and starting to try and get some ideas on how to make this more interesting. Now what does happen in a moment is I start duplicating and blending them by flipping it, and then using the blend modes to go down and create some interesting effects to really try and mix it up at this point. So I'm just scrolling down the different ones here, you can see, and seeing which one I like best. And this is another one of my favorite hobbies when I'm doing digital art, is to go through the blend modes in conjunction with the liquefy tool, and that really does let you get some unique and interesting art. So I do that a few times. I duplicate up, I flip to create some symmetry, and then I sort of choose different blend modes see which ones I just like the look of. You know, you don't have to worry too much about how these work. They all work in a very specific way and have specific uses, but you can take it on a light level. You know, you can go in and just be like, oh, this is cool, this is cool, this is cool. And as you get to know it a little bit more, you'll realize exactly what they do precisely do and how they do precisely work, and you'll kind of be able to predict what happened. I'm messing with the layer opacity there as well. You can change the opacity of the layers above and below so that they blend in different ways. Back into the liquify tool, and then I really start trying to pull it off to create some strange and interesting effects, and I'm still like, this is not working for me. It was a bit frustrating. Now, I don't know about you guys, I can often get frustrated when doing art. In some ways that's why I like it. It's a challenge. It's like doing anything, you know, a quiz or a game where you're like, how do I make this work? How do I solve the puzzle, I guess. Kind of like a crossword or Sudoku or something like that. It's got that similar sort of puzzle aspect to me of how do I get to somewhere that I'm interested in, that I'm happy with, how do I get away from me being not happy and not interested. It can be a frustrating game. You've got to try and not take it too seriously, otherwise it can drive you kind of mad. So there at this point, you see I experiment with just completely destroying the artwork that I've done so far and making it totally abstract, but then thinking, no, I think I'll blend it back in with the other piece I've got. At this point I do start to notice that the face has softened up and is actually looking kind of interesting, and I do quite like the sort of pink in the glasses, as sort of rose tinted glasses, and the softness of the hair in the face and stuff like that, and it's almost candy floss like hair, and I'm thinking, yeah, we're getting somewhere here. And I'm starting to imagine a crafter, somebody who likes knitting or doing wool or stained glass, and that comes in a moment when I start cutting up the piece and adding a sort of stained glass element to it, a sort of fractured look, a bit of maybe cubist like in some respects, but not super cubist, because it doesn't sort of move around and reorganize the shapes of what we're looking at. It kind of just breaks up the colors a bit and provides a bit of angle. So now I've got the symmetry there, and I'm sort of pushing and pulling around with the liquify tool again. I'm a bit concerned about those red lines, and then that's one of the other reasons I think that I decided to bring in some extra elements to try and break that up a bit. Now at this point I consider totally changing it into a face that's looking straight on, and I do sort of play with that for a minute and think, maybe that could work, and then I'm like, no, I'm not sure. I like what I've got, I'm going to stick with it. It's always nice sometimes just to say, what if I destroy this? Am I happy or unhappy? And the good thing about digital art is it's really easy to go back and say, no, I don't want to destroy it. I want to go back to where I was and continue. So then I'm playing with blacks and the eyes and trying to figure out what I'm going to do with these eyes to make them look more interesting. I'm putting those watercolor brushes again, and you can see them sort of seeping and moving around as we go through the different blending modes, trying to figure out which ones look coolest. And there we go, up into the hair with the watercolor brushes as well, just experiment and playing around, and then I'm like, oh, this works quite well around the neck here, and we could almost maybe have a wool jumper, you know, those really nice knitted jumpers you see with the different layers as they go down. I forget the name of them, despite being somebody who does occasionally dabble in fabric and that kind of thing. So I thought, yeah, maybe that kind of jumper could be a good idea. And at this point I start breaking it up as well with these lines using the same colour, and sort of creating some sort of interesting angles in there, especially because the face now is looking off in two directions. I'm like, well, this has gone totally mad really. I don't need to worry too much about keeping it looking real or anything like that. We're off into a totally different direction now, and I thought, well, this stained glass look could be quite interesting. So I sort of play around with that different levels of opacity and the colours that I'm using the fill tool there to fill in, and also different colours, different opacities, and then I try the different blend modes to see which one works best with the layer below. As you can see, there's some interesting ones and some subtle ones and some crazy ones as well. There we go. We stick with a slightly more subtle one, and then I go to try and put some extra layers of stripes into that jumper as it goes down. We use the yellow, and then we use the eraser after we've used the watercolor brushes to put some harder edges onto the bottom and to remove it off the sides, but then keep that sort of watercolor wash blend, like we've got one of those soft sort of mohair jumpers where the stripes might sort of bubble up and blend into each other a little bit. So we've got the yellow at the bottom, and then we add a little bit of blue to that as well. Try out the blend modes. I don't think we think too much to the blend modes on this occasion, so then I just do what I did before with the yellow and just add a little extra bit of colour. And that's kind of where we leave it with the jumper. We're like, yeah, that's looking alright. Now at this point I'm starting to think that yeah, we're getting there, but maybe the glasses could be improved a bit. So I use the fact that in Fresco it will, if you hold the pen down, it will create nice circle and ellipse shapes as for you, and then you can change the angles and move them around. And you can do that with straight lines as well. Just by holding the pen down, it'll flip it into a straight line or a curve, and you can get some really nice clean angles if you want to do that kind of thing. Also good if you're doing like architectural drawings and things like that. Now, so I've made the glasses look a bit better, and then I decided to blend them in just to make them look a bit grainier. Didn't want it too perfect. Playing around with the different colours. I did quite like the yellow that came up, but then I decided against it. Back into the hair to see if we can do anything with that, but everything I try fails, and I think to myself, I think we're reaching the end of this one. See, I'm just trying to maybe lighten up the face a bit, or make it, it's quite blended into the background, into the yellow, so I was a bit like, can we make it sort of be more pronounced in the face area and have some skin tones back in there, and then really brighten up those rose tinted glasses. And that slight off smile is there as well. Is that a happy person? Is that a sad person? A thoughtful person? Then we decide to head into Photoshop, I believe, and add a little bit of a filter. Are we still in Fresco or are we in Photoshop? Oh, we're in Fresco. I think what happened was it crashed. In fact, it crashed twice, and this is something you'll have to get used to. At least I've had to get used to. Fresco keeps crashing. We do head into Photoshop in a moment at the end and put a little filter on. So then I try putting green lines on, see if that works better. Then now I'm messing around with the thoughts of teeth, and then it crashed again, and we load up again. It's good though, because it just saves where you were, you don't lose anything, and it could be my laptop rather than Fresco. We just don't know how all these things mix and interact really. But since I've had this new laptop, I have had crashes on Photoshop and trying to open it where it won't get past reading the brushes, and then this, it'll just occasionally go nope, no thank you, and stop. So I just put thin black lines for the mouth just to create a little bit more emotion or thought into what might be the thoughts going on in the person's head, you know. And then I decide to make the eyes a little bit more detailed and allow you to sort of look at the person and make a judgment as to what you think they're thinking about. And I kind of have gone for this sort of dazed and confused look. You know, maybe if you enjoy your crafting so much, you can transcend into another world, can't you? You know, you've been knitting away or felting. I do think this person might be a felter, definitely making like felt animals, and then on the weekends heading out into their little studio to do some glass and maybe even ceramics. They're probably saving up for a blowtorch. These are all things I've considered myself, and they may own a small kiln, we don't know. And it's a beautiful life if you are a person that enjoys doing craft and it excites you, because there's so many different aspects to get excited about. The equipment, the process, the creativity, it just ticks all the boxes for me as well. Those kind of things with painting and digital art and everything like that, it really does keep me cheerful and gives you a reason to keep going in these dark winter days. In the summer I tend to leave the crafts alone a little bit more and the digital art, and I tend to get outside and enjoy nature. And there is aspects of that I sort of do, like photography and gardening and things, and think I'm going to be bringing that to YouTube as well, but probably on a different channel. So now we're in Photoshop and I'm just applying some extra filters. I decided to use the plastic wrap filter and then mask it just to create slight bits of more interest and effect on the upper bit of the jumper and around the eyes, but then the rest of it I sort of rubbed it out. And you know, if anyone's ever interested in how to do masking and that, there's 1,000,001 videos on how to do all that, but you know, I could do that as well if you wanted to. Let me know in the comments. So what did you think? Let me know what you think to my artwork. It's been nice to see you. I'll see you next time. Take care, like and subscribe. This is Ted Art Studios Digital.